What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the CrazyFaceUno Podcast, where everyone has a story and everyone's story matters. What's your story? If you'd like to support the show and help us tell more stories like the one you're about to hear, please visit CrazyFaceUno.com today. There, you can purchase items from our online store and donate. As always, I'm your host, Shane McNeely, and boy, are you in for a treat today. It is my honor and privilege to introduce our guest today, all the way from Monterrey, Mexico, Hiram Villarreal. I almost got it. Did I get it, Hiram?
You did it as good as I think you could get it.
Yeah, I was practicing, guys.
The R's are tough.
Yeah. Hiram, will you say your name for everyone so that they can actually hear how it's actually supposed to be said?
Yeah, so it's Hiram Villarreal.
All right. Perfect. Dude, we first met at Invisible Children, like so many of my guests, and it's funny, you know, like we were talking in the beginning, it's been years, since we've talked, but we've like followed each other on Facebook and social media, but, you know, we haven't kept in touch and we haven't chatted in a while, so it's really good to have you on the show. I want to say thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited. I've listened to a few other friends and colleagues on your podcast, and yeah. I was always wondering, like, I wonder like how I can get there. Mm-hmm. And it's really a privilege to be here.
Awesome, man. Well, the privilege is all mine, dude. I know it a little bit. If you've been listening to the podcast, you probably know I get on Facebook usually and stalk you on Facebook and then kind of make a few notes. And so I kind of know what you're doing, but what are you up to these days?
Yeah, so I'm currently working here in Monterrey for UNHCR's field office. That's United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees.
Awesome. It's
been less than a year. I spent 2 years with a partner, another nonprofit in Mexico City, working with refugees as well. My focus has always been employment, so anything that means integration for them and anything that means making an income for them and their families, and of course everything that surrounds that, right? So it's been almost 3 years that I've been doing this, a little less than a year with the UNHCR.
That's cool. What is it as far as where are your clients or the people that you work with, where are they all coming from? Is it just around the world or?
Well, it really changes. It's mostly Central America, Venezuela, but we get this like surges of different communities coming in, depending on the political climate at the moment. Like,
sure.
And I can't really like get too into detail with this, but I remember a few years back during the Muslim ban. The next week we had about 30 Somalians at our office. So it really does change with the political context of the moment.
Yeah, and where the unrest might be around the world. That makes sense.
It's a very interesting way of understanding the world, but through different eyes. I love my work.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's awesome. When you left Invisible Children, did you go like straight into this type of like role, or what was the path to get from like your Invisible Children days to where you are?
I didn't. I was very young, so like when I first got into Invisible Children, I must have been 18, 19, because I was fresh out of high school.
Yeah.
And then after that, so I went to school. I did a few internships.
Okay.
I did another great one in DC with, at the moment it was called the World Security Institute. I think they changed their name now.
Okay.
It's called Global Zero because they mostly focus on like world security and like nuclear non-proliferations and like very, very like high profile things that I don't understand a lot about. But
I'm
so
familiar with Global Zero. Yeah, they seem to be doing some good work though.
They do amazing work. So I just like did a few internships kind of like on the like topic, I guess, like security.
Sure.
But Monterrey is very industrial. Like there's a lot of big corporations. So the logical option for me was more into like the corporate world. Not just because that's what everyone does here, but that's what we have here.
Yeah.
But I don't know, after a while I got a little just like I'm not really the most passionate about working at an office and just like, like doing Excel sheets. So
yeah.
So I had the chance I won a scholarship in 2016 to spend a year in France teaching Spanish. And they assign a school where you can go work. And it just happened that the school I was assigned to was in this very, I don't know what the word in English is, but it's like this community outside of Paris that is very known for being host for immigrants and refugees. And even those that were French-born have some kind of direct relation with immigration. So I would say that was, even though I've had some stories in the past, like Invisible Children, that was my first actual work directly with refugees and immigration. And right after that, it just kind of like clicked. I was actually trying to stay in France, but I started looking at other open positions in Mexico. And I found this nonprofit, and I love nonprofit work and the community and just like the way that people think around when you're in a nonprofit. So decided to stay instead in Mexico, and then it was just step at a time, and now I'm here.
That's so cool. Did you spend, correct me if I'm wrong, but did you spend some time in Iran?
I did. When I was in France, I went there for about 2 or 3 weeks during winter. Now this was just like a holiday. This was just me doing tourism and looking for like different places to go to, and I loved it so much, and I met so many people, and the experience was amazing. And I went back a second time during the spring/summer. Because one of the people I met was a teacher, and he wanted me to go back and teach English to his students at in a place called Kashan. So I went back both for work and /tourism.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah, you spent a good chunk of time. I remember, this is like, I followed you. I remember like seeing your pictures and seeing some of your posts about, being there and your time there. And so that like stuck out to me. Yeah, that's cool. That's a place that not a lot of people get to visit, or like don't go to.
Yeah, it just like it had never occurred to me what actually happened, and I don't think I've ever told this story. I really wanted to go to Iceland. So I was like about to book my flight, and it was like a certain price. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah.
And then just as I was about to click, I was like, ooh, but like Iceland is very like pricey. Like where else can I go that's not as expensive?
Yeah.
And it was this website where you get to see like all the flights to like different places depending on the price. And the one right after Iceland was Iran. I was like, ooh, I wonder.
Like, let's go.
And it was just like something that happened. I was like, I mean, I'm already at the other side of the world, and like flights are cheaper and distances are shorter. So why not? And it literally just happened like in the moment, and I just like clicked and purchased the flight. And I was very, very scared, and it turns out I had nothing to be scared about.
That's cool.
It's probably the best trip I've ever taken.
That's awesome. I mean, so you just went blind? Like you didn't have any connections, any idea what you're going to do? You just kind of like figured it out on your own, or how did that work? Like that seems like the scary part to me, is like just that big.
I mean, I was scared, but and I did go like blind basically, but something that pushed me and convinced me to actually do it, and that I knew it was a safe place regardless of what people said, was a friend's boyfriend had been there a few months back. And he was this like, I shouldn't say this, but he was this guy that just like was very like unaware of like the world. So I was like, if he can go there and enjoy it and like, you know, like keep stereotypes away, like I'm sure I'll be fine. So yeah, like I knew it was okay, but I knew nothing.
Yeah. That's funny. Were you born in Mexico?
I was born and raised. Okay. Because I'm so close to the border, I do think there's like a different culture in the north part of Mexico, specifically the city.
Yeah.
We're very criticized for being more Americanized.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm born and raised. Don't have any other nationalities or anything like that.
That's cool. And so you were born in Monterrey?
Yeah, born in Monterrey.
Nice. I was gonna ask about France too. How did you like France? Did you like Europe, that area? Did you get to travel outside of just France itself?
Yeah, I think before I went to Iran, France was my favorite place. I had the chance to go there during high school, so my goal was to learn French, and at that time I already knew I wanted to go more into like the diplomatic world, so I wanted to learn French. So I had a really good experience during high school there for a year, and I always wanted to go back because I had a lot of friends, but it just never really happened, and money was tight and stuff. So in 2016, I applied for this scholarship to go teach there, and I love France. I love just everything and all the museums and culture, and there's so many things to see in the history.
Yeah.
I think now, after all different experiences that I've had, I mean, I still love France, but it's not necessarily like my favorite place at the moment.
Sure.
But like I still love it and want to go back, and I love everything about it.
Yeah, that's cool. My wife and I, we like had a layover, like a 12-hour layover in Paris, and so we like jumped out, went to the Eiffel Tower, walked around a bit. It was like 10 o'clock by the time PM by the time we got there. So it was like late. We're like jet lagged, like we're tired, you know. We ended up like buying a hotel room just to sleep for like 4 hours and then got back on the plane. Like it was, we were coming from Thailand back from our honeymoon. So we had already been on the plane for like 12 hours and then we had like a 12-hour layover and then another like 6 or 7 hours. I don't know. It was another like long flight, 9 hours maybe. And so it was a quick little, you know, stop and go, but it's a place I'd like to go back to and explore a little bit more for sure.
You should. It's wonderful, and I think Paris at night is magical.
Just
walking down the streets, and yeah.
And there's like, I mean, even though it was late, I mean, it was pretty busy still. You know, everybody was out and about, and there was still people going and things happening. You know, but. Yeah, it's a place I want to go and visit eventually and go back to for sure. Dude, I started.
You really should, and the food is wonderful.
Yeah, that's what I hear. Everybody says the same thing, like food and wine and just the culture in and of itself. You know, is an experience. And like you said too, the like history and the museums, and there's just so much culture there.
Yeah.
I've started this new thing and I kind of forgot about it. What are 3 words you would use to describe yourself?
Ooh.
Putting you on the spot.
Yeah, you should have told me. Good question. I would say community is one of them. It doesn't necessarily define me per se, but like that's one of the words that I really hold.
Yeah.
Like it's really important for me. So community.
I like that.
What else?
I don't know. It's hard. I couldn't even give you an answer for myself. So like, I'm
gonna ask you right after.
Ah, crap. Here we go.
I'm thinking of like the word tolerance, but I want to find one that doesn't imply like I don't agree, but I put up with it, because to me that's the definition of tolerance, and I don't like it. So I'm trying to think of something that kind of has that meaning. I guess respect, but I don't know if I would say that. So
yeah,
So I guess like a good version of tolerance would be the second one. I need to give it a thought. And the third one, I would say, and it's not something I probably wouldn't have said this before, but it's what's coming up at the moment. So self-care is the third one.
Cool.
It's 2 words, so technically those are my 4 words. Community,
I'll put
tolerance, and self-care.
Self-care, so it's 1. No, I like that. That's cool. I mean, I love that you said community. I firmly believe, even just the sharing of people's stories with CrazyFaceUno is it's a community, and part of the direction I would love to have is there's more of this like network of people, as you come onto the show and as people follow and listen, it's sharing people's lives. We live in such a divided world, and so often, how many times do you have the opportunity to, when was the last time that you sat down with your friends and like had an open dialogue about your life like this, long form for an hour and a half? And I think that's special, and I think it's a community. It's sharing a part of your world and a part of your life, and that's something that I really believe in, that life's meant to be shared, and I mean that is in the community aspect of things, and so I really like that word. I think that's a really cool word to describe yourself.
I think one of the reasons why I wanted to do this was I feel like there are a lot of spaces where, you get to have a conversation with people, but you focus on one thing, like if you're going to interview someone, like the easiest thing is you ask about their work. What do you do? And I feel like a lot of people put a lot of value on what you do. And 100%. Of course it's a part of a person's life. And to me, like my job is a great part of who I am right now, and I love it. But what I love about this is you talk about what happens, like behind the scenes, and you talk about, what got you there and what makes you like wake up every day. And I think that has a lot to do with community. Like,
for sure,
I could share like a very specific, almost like bullet points of, like who Hiram is.
Yeah.
But the fact that we get to sit down and just like, like open book, share everything and anything. And to me, that's community. And I love that.
I'm right there with you. I completely agree. Yeah. And it's funny because I had Anne Wang. I don't know. Did you ever meet Anne?
Yeah.
So I had her on. We had a similar conversation. It's like there's so much value, and I've had multiple conversations about this, but especially in America, and I know you're in Mexico right now, but I think the world has kind of adopted some of this, but we put so much of the individual person's like identity, and even as the person, like even as Hiram and like as Shane, like you put so much value on what you do, what your work is. It's an identifier, and I struggle with that a little bit because, as you've probably seen, like all my posts about my guests, I usually just have their like title of like what they do and what they're doing. And I struggle with that a little bit, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't know how else to do it. Does that make sense? But like,
it's like, that's like the first door that you hit. So you have to knock that door, open it, and then see what's like in the room and get the conversation flowing. And to some people, I think that's just a way to break the ice. And like for me, and I don't know if this is something I should say, but I have a lot of insecurities, and to me, my job is like one of the things that I'm sure about.
Yeah.
And I feel like it gives me a lot of confidence, and it also gives me a story to tell. So it's also understandable to have that be like the first approach to a conversation, or to have that be like the I don't know, like the opening number, I want to say.
Yeah.
But I do think that we need to. I just heard about someone close to mine that just like had a hard few months, these past few months, and just lost his job and just like ended a relationship. And I was just talking about this with my mom, how like his identity is like shaken, and he doesn't know who he really is just because he lost, like that title of what your job is, and like A, my job, B, my relationship, C, I don't know, my hobby. And I don't know. It's. I don't even know where I'm going with this, but I feel like we have the identity that we present to others, and then once we take that out, like, who are we? And we need to think more about that, because if we wake up tomorrow and we don't have what we have today, who are we? And that actually touches a lot on refugees and immigration and the job that I do. If Shane tomorrow had to wake up, let's say, I don't know, in Thailand, and you don't speak the language and you don't know the culture and you don't, like, who is Shane and
who am I?
I don't know. It's a great exercise to think about.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I've started to incorporate the three, like, what are 3 words that describe you? Because, and I want to get to that, like, more in the beginning of, you know, the podcast, just right out of the gates. Because I think it's, you know, I do lead into, and I always start with kind of like your job and what you're doing for work, and kind of like, you know, and then we go back and kind of let us down that path of like, okay, this is what you're doing now, right? But like, how did you get there? You know, was this what you always wanted to do? Is there something else you want to do? But I think it's really cool to incorporate like how you would describe yourself, right? Into this platform, I guess, because of the same things. It's the identifier. And you're talking about your friend. I mean, when I first started CrazyFaceUno and started doing this, and I still struggle with this, it is an identity thing. You know, like people are like, what do you do? You know, like, what do you do for work? I'm like, well, I started this storytelling brand called CrazyFaceUno. And they're like, what's that? You know, like, what's that mean? And so it's always a good intro into it. But, you know, and then it's just interesting, like how your words and how we put, you know, value on the individual based on the things they're doing and what they're doing and who they are. And I love the idea, or like the, you know, that the I don't know, just like almost like a societal practice of just being like, what if you woke up, like you said, what if I woke up in Thailand, I didn't speak the language, I don't have a job, I don't have anything, who am I? What is my makeup? What is my value? And because I do have value regardless of where I, you know, but it's maybe self-care. It's like your number 3, you know, of kind of like re-examining and taking a look at your own individual self. Life's tough, man. It's a interesting roller coaster, isn't it?
It's a very interesting roller coaster. And yeah, I think that's why I think self-care is so important for me. Just like I've had, and not even through tough times, like even during the good times, I've moved around a lot, and every time I wake up in a different place and I have to like deconstruct myself and then like rebuild who I am or who I think I am. And it takes a lot of introspection, and it takes a lot of like me time and what do I want to get out of this, and where do I want to go. And I feel like we think of self-care as, you know, like therapy, but we don't think of it just as an everyday thing, you know, like like cooking breakfast for yourself and like visiting family and friends, or deciding that you don't want to do anything and just stay in bed all day. But we don't consciously think about it, and it's a really big part, yes, of getting better, but also of just like going through your daily life. Yeah,
it's like it's doing what you need to do and not feeling guilty about it. Exactly. But it's the guilt part, because I feel like, you know, it's my wife and I were having a conversation a few months ago, and she works all day long. You know, she's got her office job, she works hard, and she comes home, and sometimes she just wants to like tune out, you know, and but yet she kind of like beats herself up about it a little bit. Sorry, honey. About like doing it. You know, she's like, I like TikTok. And I'm like, cool. Like, that's fine. Enjoy TikTok. Like, you don't need to be like, I'm a lazy piece of shit because I like listen to TikTok and I like enjoy that. I'm like, no, just own it. Like, if you're going to do it, just own it. Like, it's okay. Like, I'm not telling you not to. Like, you're the only one stopping yourself, or you're the one that's impeding that idea, right? Like, if you're going to do it and enjoy it and love it and allow it to be that what you need, you know, that self-care for yourself.
And you don't owe anything to anyone.
Exactly.
That to me was a very big lesson. Like, there's so many things I wanted to do or not do, but just like feeling that, because again, talking about community, you feel this like, I don't know, responsibility with others, which I do believe is important. I believe in, what's the term in English? It's like effective co-responsibility. I'm making stuff up. It's just like, I do sure. I do believe we have this responsibility towards others, and our actions have consequences, and we need to like keep that in mind.
Yeah.
At the same time, you owe nothing to anyone, and no one owes anything to you. So even if you're like the worst person in the world, and someone feels like shit because of something you did, like that is still on them. People have or should look for the tools, you know, to like get ahead and get over whatever issues they're facing. So it's kind of like a balance between being responsible with your actions and towards others, but at the same time understanding that people will do stuff that will hurt you, or you just will not agree with them, and it is still not on them. You need to find the tools to get through that.
Yeah, man, and that's a tough life lesson that I think we all need to practice a little bit more, for sure. And it goes into even the conversation about value, though, you know, because I think I really believe that we have to have some sort of redemption for the bad things that people do, you know? And I see so often especially right now and in the last several years, I've really seen it where we see, oh, this person did this thing, you know, it was wrong, it was bad, they shouldn't have done it. And then it's this like, that like cancel culture idea of like, well, they did something bad, so like I can't buy their product, or I can't do this and I can't do that. And you know, there's an element, it's a balance, it's a gray area, right? But there's got to be like a redemptive, like we've got to find a way, a path to redemption, you know, of being like, man, you really screwed up, you know, you made a really poor decision, but like it's over, you did it, we've moved on, and you know, like if you keep doing it, then we have to hold you accountable, and justice is important, right? But I don't know, we can't keep dividing each other. We have to like actually work together and unify, and I think that redemption and forgiveness and you know, that is just a huge piece that I think society's missing out on.
Right. I think that this links really well with what we're talking about identity. Just like we were mentioning, like positive things, right? Like your job and your family and your relationship. Yeah. But when you talked about cancel culture, you made me think, which is like how many people I know that, like, I don't know, 10 years ago made a really poor life decision, and up till this day, like that's the image or the identity that we think they have. And
exactly.
I don't know. You're giving me something to think about later.
Yeah. I mean, I do this. I thought the same thing about, man, because I look at me, and you talked about it, like Invisible Children, you were young. Man, I was young. We were all babies there, you know? Like, I was, like, high school. I was a child. Like, I don't know. Like, if anybody that's listening, if you're, like, thinking of me in the same context as, like, high school, college, Invisible Children, like, am I still the same person? Yeah, there's a lot of things that are the same, right? But I've grown up a lot. I've changed a lot, and things are different. And I want you to see me for me now, not for me who I was then. But then I catch myself doing the complete opposite to people from my past, you know? And so it's like I'm talking to myself in the mirror here, you know. I mean, it takes two to tango, and everybody has to practice that and to look at that, because it's difficult. And when you look back and you think about, man, you were the guy that, like, you know, teased me or bullied me or whatever in middle school, and it's like, well, maybe they've changed. Maybe they're not that same person, and I can't hold them to that same standard. It's hard, right? It takes maturity. It takes forgiveness, it takes tolerance, and you know, it takes a lot of work, but I think it's important, and I think it's worth it.
You're giving me a lot to think about.
Man,
my parents just bought a house recently, and one of their neighbors is someone that I went to school with, and he was just like, he was a bully to me.
Mm-hmm.
And like when I saw him, I was like, ooh, like,
yeah.
But I mean, he's like 30 now. He has a child. He's married. He's like, I have no idea what his story is. To me, he's still that like 12-year-old that would like bully me in school. And it's funny how like we grow up. We like, to me, that's not even relevant now. Like that happened over 20 years ago. But like to me, that's still who he is.
Yeah.
And
well, and those feelings are real.
Yeah.
You know, that hurt and those feelings that you had at that time, if you haven't dealt with them, then they're still there, you know, and like it's real. And I don't know, it's not easy, but yeah, I mean, there's people in my life that are the same way, man. And I haven't figured it out. I haven't solved the riddle, but I think it's important to at least be cognizant and intentional about some of those things and figuring out how we deal with, you know, the mistakes we've made in the past. And it goes both ways. It can't just be like, well, they never came and apologized to me. Well, you know, like, have you dealt with it either? Yeah, maybe they should. I mean, but maybe it's...
That was sarcastic.
Yeah, I mean, but...
Like, a lot of us think that way. Like, oh, they never said that, so now they should 25 years later.
Yeah.
And going back to what I said, like, someone could have been horrible to you, but it's on you to turn the page.
Right. Exactly. Oh, I love that, man. We're 30 minutes in and we're hitting home runs already, man. I love it, dude. Let's throw it back. Let's go back to childhood. What was your childhood like? How was childhood for you?
My childhood was a roller coaster.
Sure.
Like when I think of it, I had the most amazing childhood. Like, my parents were always kind to us, and they always like put their kids at the center of every decision and of everything. They were very protective of us in a good way. Like it was never too much. Yeah. It was always like the right way. But at the same time, I struggled a lot during my childhood. At the moment, I didn't know, but something that all listeners should know is you're listening to an openly gay man right now. So,
good for you, man.
So my childhood was a lot of confusion at the same time. Just like feelings that you didn't know where they were coming from. And like I said, there was some bullying at school. I went to an all-male Catholic high school, and all-male Catholic middle school.
Okay.
And like primary school in like 12 years of my life. So there was a lot of just conversations happening, mostly surrounding like religion that just like brought a lot of guilt to my life. And I don't know, it was like a there were dark times, just as there were some good times, but sometimes there were more dark times than others, and things got a little like rough right around when I turned like 14, maybe 14, 15, 16.
Starting mature and trying to figure shit out.
Yeah. And exactly, that's when you start identifying like those feelings and those thoughts, and you start putting like names to them.
Right.
The problem was that label that I had, that name that I had, was negative in my perspective at the time. So it was a great childhood. We never lacked anything. I wish I would have communicated more with my parents, just so they knew what was going on with me. But right after like all of those dark times, and when I got like the courage to come out and talk to my family, like I realized I was always okay. I just didn't know that.
Yeah. But how are you supposed to know until you know, because that's like, isn't any secret, anything that you're keeping from the people that you love, isn't that the reason that you keep it? Is because you're afraid of their response, afraid of like not being welcomed or accepted or loved or, you know, whoever. And you'd rather, you know, I mean, it's like human nature, and I think, but it's not okay.
but this is like one of the things that I struggle a lot with, because like I mentioned already plenty of times, I do believe it's everyone's responsibility to like be okay and make sure that you're okay. Having said that, I think that's a lot to put on a kid and on a child and on a teenager. So in that particular sense, I do think it's every parent's responsibility to make sure that they're okay and to educate themselves on all topics that could be happening to their children, regardless of if it's probable or not that it'll happen. But every parent needs to be ready to have open conversations with their kids about diversity in all of its kinds, about something that I hold very like close to me right now, just because of the work I do, is we need to talk to children about saying no. And I feel like a lot of people avoid awkward conversations with children because they're children, and like, why would they need to know about this? And of course there's truth to that, but there's ways to approach that. So I think it's everyone's obligation just to make sure that our children are okay and they know that they're okay, and they know that they can say no or they can say yes, and they can be true to themselves, and they can talk or not talk, but know that someone, I don't know, there's a lot of thoughts around this, but
it's essentially just saying like you're valued, you're respected, and like, I don't know, it gives permission to be who you are.
Yeah. And every adult needs to know that. And we don't take that close to our hearts, and we don't do the tough work.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're protecting our children the way that we should. And I struggle with that a bit.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways we're not doing it for our children because we're not doing it for ourselves.
Right. And I mean, I don't have numbers right now, but I'm sure if you look at like statistics, like if you could see how many children leave their homes, how many children are kicked out of their homes, regardless if it's related to sexual orientation or not.
Yeah.
How many children flee their countries seeking protection? Like,
yeah,
it's a growing number, and that just talks about how we're like taking it for granted. We think we're okay when like when you sweep the dust under the rug. But we need to do the hard work and have the hard conversations. Children are so smart, and they are so receptive, and we shouldn't avoid having those conversations with them just because we don't think they're going to get it or they're too young.
Yeah.
They need to know, and we need to tell them it's okay.
100%. Completely agree. I mean, companies even do this with us as adults, as like the consumers, it's like, why are you treating us like a child? We can understand. You can talk to us like we're human beings, like you don't have to put some sort of spin on it. Like, just talk to us, like be real with us and talk. And I think it's the same, talking to children, like you said. I mean, having real conversations and not always pulling punches, like sometimes it's okay to just say the truth and say what's real.
Sure. Yeah, I agree.
When you were, I guess I think of childhood as like elementary school, like pre-adolescence, like pre-middle school. But when you think about that, in your search for, your own identity in a sense, do you remember the first time you had like feelings that you were like, I think I have feelings that are different than other people?
I do remember it, but it didn't come across that way. Like, I remember, what was it? It must have been like 5th grade. So I must have been like 11-ish. I didn't feel an attraction.
Sure.
Or like I said, I didn't like put a label to it.
Yeah.
But I remember like there were specific people like in my class, or like teachers even, that I would like want to be friends with. Like it was like that kind of attraction, to put a word to it. Just like, ooh, I want to like get to know you. Like, you're really cool. I want to be your friend. And eventually as I grew older, I realized like those were like the beginnings of like me defining who I was. Just like trying being more curious about people that looked like me, and like wanting to be closer to them. But there was no like like definitive moment where I said, "Ooh, okay, I have, like a physical attraction or an emotional attraction to someone that's my same gender. Oh, that means I'm gay." It was a very like a transition that took a few years for me to know.
That's cool. Yeah, that's interesting. What were some of your interests as a child, like growing up?
I was very geeky. I was very like a little nerd, and I loved it. I say this in like the most positive way.
That's awesome.
I loved reading. I loved just like debate club and just like I loved watching like Discovery Channel and like National Geographic, and I read a lot, not just like novels and like Harry Potter. Like I read a lot of like, I remember my favorite book was this book that my parents gifted me when I was like, I don't know, like 12 or 13. I still have it. It was a book about national parks around the world. Okay. Like the most important, and like it talked about like all animals in the region, and I loved it.
That's cool.
Yeah, and I was very into outdoors. My family, especially my grandfather, they were very into fishing. So every summer we would go for like months to this lake in a place not far from here, and just like stay in the cabin for the whole summer. And there was like a pool, and we had like a grill where we would like, I don't know, do carne asada, and so I was very into outdoors as well.
That sounds like ideal. Like I want to do that right now. Like I want to go like
the most fun.
Stay in your cabin, hang out in the pool, and go fishing in your lake. Like
and then you like eat the fish that you caught in the morning. Yeah. It was perfect.
That's awesome. That's so cool. What did you say you wanted to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a paleontologist.
Nice.
I still kind of do, but I think it's too late for me. That was my dream. I loved animals, and then when I found out there were other animals that are not here anymore, like it was so fascinating to me. Jurassic Park to me was like my favorite movie. It still is. A paleontologist.
That's awesome. I think that's what Anne Wang said too. She wanted to be a paleontologist. Her and I were talking about our love for like rocks, and I don't know. That's so cool. Yeah, it's always interesting. I love like hearing what other people wanted to be when they were growing up, because it's just it's a unique mind state, like a mind frame. When you're younger, like you don't know, like you just like see something. It's like something that's fun to you, and you're like, I want to be that. Like, I think it's awesome.
Something funny, and I'm always gonna remember when I was in 3rd grade. So I'm in Mexico, right? So everything's in Spanish, and we had our English classes at school, and during the 3rd grade they gave us the option to take French, and I remember the teacher said, French is the language that you need if you want to work for the United Nations. And I was so young, but when I heard him say that, I was like, "Ooh, I need to learn French." And that's when I took my first French lesson. I was like 10-ish. It was like 2 or 3 months. I didn't really learn anything until high school when I went to France. But I do remember, even though I really wanted to be a paleontologist, I do remember since I was very young.
Yeah.
It was my goal. Yeah. I want to learn French because I'm going to be a diplomat, or I'm going to work for the UN. I always saw myself in this like role, like, I don't know, world peace and traveling everywhere and meeting people in the community. And it's really interesting. Like when I got this new position, when I first entered into the UN system, like I was of course very, very excited, but it felt like a very natural growth, like that was my next step. It didn't seem impossible to me, but I always remembered like that image of that little kid saying, "Ooh, I'm gonna learn French because I want to work for the UN."
I love that. I love stuff like that. Like there's so many things like that where you're like, man, I almost like breathed it into existence when I was little. Like, stored that away, and then when you see it kind of come to fruition, it's awesome. How many languages do you speak?
Right. Only 3.
Only.
So English, Spanish, and French. Only.
Only 3. Just a few.
Well, don't take this personal, but I feel like it's very normal in other places to have at least 2 languages.
Oh yes, but in America, it's like the most arrogant country. Like, yeah, no. United States, you're like, oh, you speak English, so you have privilege, so you're good. Like,
so Spanish, English, and French. I
Cool.
took about 5 years of Italian.
Okay.
So I think I could pick it up if I tried, but
Yeah.
There's not a lot of places where I could practice Italian, so
Yeah, makes it more
I
difficult.
will stick to 3.
That's awesome. Specifically, kind of focusing on high school, middle school, high school. What kind of student were you?
That's when I was always a geek, but that's when my grades started going down.
Yeah.
And that's also when I started having all these thoughts about who I am and what it meant, and am I going to be rejected? So those were the hard years. And in terms of high school, it translated into me not being as good a student, but being very involved in student groups. Those were the places where I felt safe and where I felt like there were other people like me, even though at the moment, like, I didn't know, but I just like felt connected to people.
Yeah.
So my high school years were very, very focused on just like life outside of the classroom, which is how I got to Invisible Children.
Yeah.
How I got to where I am today. So I guess now that I think of it, I'm very thankful for those hard years.
Yeah.
But yeah, my high school experience was mostly focused on just like planning events and conferences and student council and all of that.
Yeah, I've never thought of it like that. I was kind of the same way. I never thought about like I put my focus into, for me it was always sports. I mean, that was kind of, but it's an outside of the classroom kind of thing, activity, and I was bullied in middle school. And I think that was really a turning point for me, just as an individual, as a person, of, not knowing where I fit in and where I belonged. And I think those questions, it's interesting that you kind of correlate those two things of like figuring out your own identity. For you, it was your sexuality. For me, it was just like, where's my community? Who are the people that I like get along with? But that resonates with me because I feel like, the classroom was like, it's not where I found my identity. It's not where I was accepted. It wasn't where I was welcomed in, where for you, maybe it was some of these like external groups. And for me, it was sports, the sports teams, that community was where I was like welcomed in and ushered in and accepted and kind of found my value. And I think that's transpired and kind of like pushed me into adulthood as well. But yeah, that's really interesting. I never really like saw it through that lens or that from that angle.
Do you remember? I don't know if this happened when you were at Invisible Children, because I was there like in 2 different classes.
Yeah.
But we took this we took this like personality test. I forget the name, and they give you like letters and they stand for something. Like
ENFJ.
Personality trait. Yeah, so I'm ENFP.
Okay.
And I remember when we took the test, someone mentioned like this specific like personality trait that most of us got was actually very rare. But in that specific place, it was most people that had that.
Interesting.
And
I think I'm
it
ENFP
makes me think
too.
how like you and I are. We probably are.
I think I am.
And I mean, you and I are very different. Like I don't think I've ever touched like a soccer ball or a football or like.
Sure.
But I think there's something. We find ourselves in other people. So like that was your experience with sports. That was my experience with student groups.
Yeah.
And eventually, like there's this phrase that we say a lot in Spanish, and in the gay community, and it's God makes them, but they find each other. And that makes me think of like both my high school experience and my Invisible Children experience, and how like we are all so different, but something happened that we all like came together in that one place. And even though we had this, like, I don't know, like this personality trait that was like 1% of like the global population, like at that place, it was like 75% of us. Like, so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what's one of the beautiful things about Invisible Children is we brought all these people. It's from so many different walks of life, different cultures, different, experiences growing up. I mean, think about even the guests I've had on thus far, it's like we've had so many different, cultural. You grew up in Mexico, I grew up in the United States, and conservative, Midwest, like very different experiences. But yet I think it's cool. And this is what I love about, just talking about the way I structure the podcast in general of current day, childhood, back up to current day. Like we've all gone through this process. It doesn't matter where you're at. It may look different, but you started as a child. You started as a baby. You came into this world as a baby, and you've grown into who you are today. And we've all done that, right? And it looks different for everybody else. But I think that when we can see other people's journey and that path that they've been on throughout their life and go, you know what, we're not all that different. We've been through similar things. It looks different. It had a different experience. I viewed it through my lens. But and then I think that translates into, present day, like wherever you're at. When you're out in public, you're walking in the grocery store and walking down the street, and you don't know what the other person's going through, but you know that we're all going through it, and I think it's I don't know, I think it's cool. I think it's a unifying thing, and I think it's important to find those things that we can look on the positive side of things and find those things that we have in common versus those things that divide us and separate us.
Right, I agree.
What about, it sounds like your social groups, maybe that's where you found your kind of like group of friends. Did you have a lot of friends? Did you feel like you had a good core group of friends, or was that part of the struggle?
When I first got into high school, I didn't have a lot of friends. That was when I left like this like all boys Catholic school where I was in, and then I went to high school, and like for the first time in my life, I shared a classroom with girls. For the first time in my life, I didn't wear a uniform. For the first time in my life, I met atheists. And like right now when I think of it, like to me it's like irrelevant, but like people can believe what they believe, and that's amazing. But at the time, it was a shock to me to find out that there were people that didn't believe in what I did. So that first year of high school to me was very, very important. Yeah. But I kind of like secluded, like I just like sat in the corner and was very like observant, and not necessarily in a negative way, not necessarily in a like outcast kind of way. Like I just chose to like not interact and just like see what the world was outside of my bubble. That's when I went to France, and then after that 1 year I came back, but I wasn't in the same year. So like all of my classmates were a year above me. Okay. Because I didn't do it through school. I just like went independently. Okay. So when I came back, and it was a new group of people that I didn't know, and they were like a generation like below me. Because like I don't know, at the time I must have been already like 18, but most of my classmates after I came back, there must have been like 16, which to me was like a very big difference at the time. Because I was
especially
always like
when you're in high school, like those age gaps feel so like so much bigger when you're younger than they do when you get older.
Yeah, and then like I was already like I was not the same age as everyone at school. And then I went that year and then came back, so it was already like to me a very big difference. Yeah. But it wasn't until I came back and I like started high school again, let's say, where I met my friends that up till this day are my best friends. And cool. I had already like processed all this like cultural shock of going to high school and like seeing all of this new like ideas and perspectives. And then that year in France was also a very big cultural shock for me. So when I came back, I was already like this like very like open-minded, open book, like but like new person. So like I fit a lot better with my classmates when I came back. And yeah, like that's when things started getting better. Like I mentioned before that those were hard years, but it was mostly like in my head. But socially speaking, like I was very close to my friends. Up till this day, they're like my closest friends, and I don't know. It was good. I love my friends.
That's awesome. What do you think? All the traveling that you've done. How has that changed you as a person?
It has made me as a person. When things got hard, the only way for me to see better things was like going somewhere else, regardless of if I hopped on a plane or not. I was in a very dark place in my mind, and then I went to Visible Children, and I realized like, ooh, there's like amazing people like from all kinds of colors, races, religions, shapes, sizes, and everything is beautiful. So like it helps me process things on an individual level when I see things like from an outside perspective. And then just like meeting people and meeting the way things do, like Marshall Bang, you know Marshall Bang, of course, right?
Yep.
So he was my teammate, and I don't know if he knows this, and if he's listening, he should know that. Marshall was such a crucial point in my decision to come out.
Cool.
When I saw him so free, and I'm not talking about anything, like I cannot talk about his reality, but
yeah,
when I saw him just like singing all the time and like dyeing his hair and like being as loud as he is and as loving as he is, and everyone loved him for being so authentic, like that was to me like such a pivotal point in my life when I met him and lived with him in a van for 3 months. And it's through these experiences that my life got better, and traveling is such a big part of that. When I went to France, I saw like different things than what I had seen here when I lived in the States as well. I don't know. It's hard to put words into it. It's just like, I think traveling makes things better. I think traveling is education. I think traveling is learning and deconstructing and like unlearning. I feel kind of guilty because I also know traveling is like there's a lot of privilege in traveling.
It is, yeah.
I don't want to, right? I don't want to be that person that's like, ooh, you should travel to like read the book of your life. No, like some people don't get that chance. Like there's so many like memes and inspirational quotes about traveling, and it makes me feel very aware of some people don't get that chance. And some people just like talk about traveling as if it were like a must for your life, but that's not everyone's reality. But I'm very privileged. I've been blessed enough to go to many places where things work differently, and that has taught me a lot. And it also helps me like, this is so not humble, but it also helps me like give back, and it helps me like be better. So yeah,
I completely agree. I've not thought a lot about the privilege of traveling. You make a good point with that. Oh man, I just think traveling, even, even as I'm trying to think of like the way to spin it in a positive way in some ways, I guess. If you have that privilege, I feel like you're doing the world an injustice if you don't take advantage of it, because it does change your perspective. It allows you to see things through a different lens. It opens the door to another world, and it frees up another space in your mind. But even, as an American, even in you traveled the United States a little bit, and like there's different pockets of culture within the United States, and that's the part, I grew up in small town Indiana, small town Illinois, Indiana, and it's like people in my hometown, I'm like, man, get out, you know, or like my own family members. Sometimes I'm like, hey, it's okay to like leave this little town. You can go to the big city. You can always come back, right? Like you don't like you have this option. Your family's always going to welcome you back. That's a privilege. You're completely correct. But like, do it. Like, experience something different. Find yourself. And I think that's
I do think there's ways to travel. Like, I remember like being in San Diego and thinking like, this is America. Yeah. And then going to the deep south, I mean, like, whoa, like, this is another America. And
wait, were you
don't
deep
need a
south
passport
too?
for that. You don't.
I
was Florida, but we had a few dates in Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia, I think. But it was like
I was deep south too.
My
first tour, I was deep south.
Really?
Yeah, that's right. Because Marshall, you guys were both on like all of our like Salesforce stuff and like our past like notes and whatnot. Yeah.
And we were the first Florida team at the time. Yeah.
That's so right. I totally forgot about that.
So I loved my experience. I don't think everyone could have done Florida, but we did, and I loved it.
Yeah.
And the Deep South has so much history and culture. Like we also think of
in diversity.
And we think of these states as like, well, this is my perspective. I don't know if it's everyone's, but we think of these states as like places where maybe like at the time there's, I don't know, things could be better for many people, and that's true. They are very conservative states, and that means for some people, like, again, things could get better. But at the same time, these are places that hold so much history and culture, and I get so angry when my American friends...
Oh, we lost you. All right. I believe we may...
Can you hear me?
Yes, there you are.
Okay, perfect. I was like, no, I was on a roll. I get so angry when they tell me, like, we have so much culture and they don't. But then I'm like, wait, so what about, like, the Deep South, and what about Hawaii and Alaska, and what about, like, you know, like, all of the culture you have, Native Americans, national parks, and there's so much to see in the United States that I feel people don't, and they may take for granted. And like I said, traveling is a privilege, but you don't need to go far. You can go next door and see something different. You can go somewhere in your city. There's museums, there's things to see. And I think there's different ways of traveling. My way of traveling definitely is more related to like stepping out of the comfort zone. Yeah. My family is very like into big resorts and all inclusive and don't leave your hotel room at all. And I'm more into like hiking and getting into like the local culture and stuff. But I think it's an experience for everyone, and people need to like step out, because that's the only way to see things, like I said at the beginning, things from a different point of view and through different eyes.
Yeah, for sure. You said, you mentioned how you learned of Invisible Children in high school. Is that correct?
Right.
Did you go straight from, you know, your high school to Invisible Children then?
I did. Must have been my last semester, and a friend of mine, she was organizing the screening at my high school, and she needed help. She was like planning and organizing, and I didn't know what I was getting myself into. Yeah. I actually didn't see the documentary at the time. That was The Rescue. I didn't see it, so I just like hopped in and started planning the event. And then a few days before, she said, I remember the guest speaker from the conference don't have a place to stay. Their like hotel situation fell through, so they need a place to stay. And I just thought, like, in my mind, I was thinking of this like very formal conference with like a very like professional guest speaker, like staying in like really nice hotels. And I was like, how am I going to host them in my house? Like, that makes no sense to me. And then the day of the screening, like I realized one of them actually had just like gotten out of high school as well, from the team in Mexico.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, like they're just like me, and sure, you can stay with me. And they ended up staying for like a week at my place.
Nice.
And I didn't know it at the time, but
anybody listening that's worked at Invisible Children realizes how huge that is.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know it at the time, but like they were recruiting me. Like once we got training and they told us like how to find like all these contacts that could like help the organization and stuff, I realized, oh, they were recruiting me for sure.
Oh, that's so
so yeah. So right after high school, I went to Invisible Children. I was there for 6 months, did the Florida tour, one of the best experiences in my life.
Yeah.
And then I went back for Coney 2012.
Yeah, and you were on the street teams.
Yes.
In LA.
LA.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a not well-known branch of Invisible Children at the time.
Yeah. And I think, well, at least in my experience in LA, I think it was very successful. I think, like you said, it's not well known because it wasn't very visual, and it wasn't very like.
It was relational.
Yeah, but for the people in the city that needed that support system, I think it was very successful, very important, and yeah, I loved my experience there.
Yeah, that's I would. We can maybe dig into that a little bit later or something, but yeah, I would love to talk about that experience or just some of that thought. I think it just would have taken time. You know, I think the expectation on how long it was going to take to establish a team there, to have this like foundation, you know, I think was just maybe a little bit skewed as to what how that would go and what that expectation was. But it was a great idea, a cool concept.
Yeah.
So you said, I'm trying to get to the point maybe of when you did come out finally to your family and to your friends, and you mentioned how Marshall Bang was very influential in your life at Invisible Children and just how free he was. At what point in time, you know, when did you come out? What was that like? What was that process for you?
Yeah. It wasn't that long after coming back from IC. I came back in December, and I guess I started coming out in like February or March of 2010. I started with friends, and I took this like huge responsibility of like doing it the way I thought was the proper, ideal, like respectful way for others, which was like coming out like personally, face to face, having a conversation with everyone. So I started with a few friends that I knew were going to be okay with it. And to me, that was just like a very needed step so that I could then come out with those that were harder for me. Yeah. So that I could have people to like fall back on should anything. So I started with a few friends. And then I started with my best friend, which, I mean, to me, that was a very, very important moment. Just she didn't believe me, and she thought I was making a joke because she was always like very like pro gay rights. So when I told her and she thought I was joking, she got mad. And then like we had the conversation, but it was very exhausting actually. So yeah. And then I just like kept having the conversation with so many people, like, because my group of friends at the time was like, I don't know, about 10 people, 12 people. But it got so exhausting where it came to a point where I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do it through text. So I was just like, hey, I want to talk to you. And then if my friends were like, okay, let's talk, let's meet, I would have the conversation. And if they were like, ooh, but this week is a little tough, I was like, okay, then you should just know this, I'm gay. And I know, but you know what? I'm so proud of that because And if there's anyone listening to this that hasn't come out and feels the need to come out, like, we put so much pressure on ourselves. There's no right way to come out. And to some people it's having the conversation, but to some people it's not having it. And not because they're hiding anything. They just, like, you know, like, from this day on, I'm going to live my life true to myself. Yeah. And I don't need to have a conversation. But I feel like we think of, like, the perfect way, and there's no perfect way. Just do what's best for you and what works for you. And in my case, it got very, very exhausting. So I just decided, like, you know, I'm going to finish with this, like, 10 people. Then after this, I'm just not going to come out anymore. Like, people are going to find out, because I'm also very public about it. So people will know, but there's no need to sit and talk to everyone about it. And, like, we come out all the time. Like, you get a new job and you need to let them know who you are, or you feel the need to do so.
That's the part that we're still not there yet, you know? I mean, there's so much, like, that's taken place in the world, but there's still such a long ways to go too, you know? And again, I'm very privileged with the family I have and with the place I live in. Mexico is actually, I mean, we have our problems and issues, but we also have an accepting society in some spaces. And those spaces happen to be where I was, so I was very lucky. After I came out with my friends, I started a relationship, my first boyfriend. Nice.
And I knew the word was just going to get out, and I was so tired of the whole experience of coming out. And I didn't want my parents to, like, find out through any other way, because that was just going to be, like, a bigger toll on my mind. So I told my sister first, and she was like, oh, okay, that's great. It was very late at night, and, like, I literally told her, and she was like, okay, thank you. And then we, like, just, like, went to bed. A few days later, that was actually the hard part. I couldn't talk to my parents. It was so hard for me. So I wrote a letter. I gave it to my mom first. By this time, it was already, like, August or September. So I wrote a letter for my mom and gave it to her. And I was like, don't read it. She had a trip to Vegas with her sisters, and she's very close with her sisters, and she processed a lot of her, like, life through conversations with her sisters. So I was like, read it on the plane, and we'll talk in a week. Don't read it right now.
That's a good way to do that.
Yeah, but then she did read it, like, right there at the moment. So she was like, hey, let's talk. And we had a very, very heartfelt conversation, very true conversation. I don't think she needed to apologize for anything, but she did apologize for just things that she didn't see and things that she wasn't aware of. I didn't want to tell my dad at the time because, like, the holidays were approaching, and in my mind, it would make things awkward. And she motivated me to tell my dad as well. So right then, I talked to my dad as well. I was so surprised at how supportive he is. Like, coming from we are in general a religious family. We went to Catholic high school, and my dad was, like, all the stereotypes of this, like, macho man, you know, like the fishing and the hunting and the big truck. And so I was very scared, but he responded the way I wish every parent would respond. He asked me if I was okay. He asked me if I needed anything. He apologized for not being aware enough about it and promised to learn more about it.
Dude.
And that was it. It was actually a very, like...
That's so cool. I'm, like, tearing up. That's like exactly what, like you said, like, that's exactly what you want every parent to say and do, and, like... that's cool.
Yeah, it was great. A few years later, I found out that my mom reached out to some like old friends from, like, her college years and, like, friends of the family that are gay and are, like, living in marriage and have, like, a stable long-term relationship. So she reached out to them, and she had them over for dinner, and all of the awkward questions that they would have asked me, they asked them instead. And just like asked for advice on how to approach these conversations with me. And basically what they said was, don't ask them. Like, if you don't ask your daughter about her life, or your other son about his life in a heterosexual relationship, like, why would you with him?
Yeah.
And that's like such an easy concept, but a lot of people just feel like because someone came out, like, it is implied that you need to react. But it's okay to say, you know what, I know nothing about this, and I will find out about this, and that's fine. Like,
I mean, I think in some ways that's probably
so my experience was great.
That's awesome. I think in some ways that's probably, people, I don't know, is it the way that they're like trying to show that they accept you and they love you and they like want to know more about you, but it's like kind of going to the extreme maybe sometimes.
Yeah, I do think it's that. Like, I wouldn't have.
It's like a positive response to something they just don't love, but it's intrusive.
I was so surprised that that's how they reacted.
Yeah,
I did have some other friends just like ask like some stupid questions about my private life that I was like, why do you need to know that?
Yeah, right.
But I do think it's with what they knew at the time, it was their way to show support, so it's okay.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, good for you, man. I'm like, I don't think we've had many conversations, especially when you were on the street teams, and I spent some time up there in LA with you and Elisa and whatnot. But I don't know if I knew that story. I think that's a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing it. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Anytime. But at the time, that story was probably still unfolding. Like, the whole like coming out, I was still very private about my life.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's cool. When did you said you went to college. When did you go to college? Yeah.
So I went to college here in Monterrey.
Okay.
I went to Tec de Monterrey for international relations. This was 2010.
Cool.
And then the situation in Mexico got very, very violent during those years. And that had an impact on our like family economy. So I dropped out of school. I did Invisible Children again in 2012 because I wanted to like be productive with my time as well.
Yeah.
And it was through Coney 2012 that I realized I wanted to change majors. So I came back and switched from international relations to social communication. Okay. So I focused a lot on public relations and like public speaking, community, everything we basically just talked about. And even though I studied social communications and international relations, like most of my work focuses on where those two areas merge. So like where human rights merge with public relations. And I love that. I think even though at the moment it didn't feel great, dropping out of school at the time was the best decision for me. So that I could switch majors eventually and get a little more like experience and decide what I really wanted to do with my life.
That's cool. What was your first job like out of college?
Right out of college. Well, because I dropped out of school and did Coney 2012 and moved around a lot, I didn't finish college till 2015 or 16.
Yeah.
So my first job was actually when I went to France
to
teach Spanish.
Nice.
I think I had like a 2 or 3 months job at a call center, just like doing customer service. But it was just like in
gotta
the
pay
meantime.
the bills.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I get that. Cool. Throughout your life, I feel like a lot of times in college, at least, and sometimes in the high school, middle school years, so, whenever this might have been or whoever it might be, but were there anyone or multiple people that you kind of looked to for inspiration that motivated you, that kind of had your back and pushed you forward as like a mentor or as just someone who, that you looked up to?
I did. I think there's many people. Most of them, it was like a specific points in time. I don't think there's like one person that has been there like, through the past 20 years, like from middle school till today.
Yeah.
But I feel like in every chapter of my life, there was one figure that I either looked up to or was inspired by or could just like go to for advice. I think most of them were teachers. There was one teacher in high school. If she hears this, she will know who she is. She was so supportive of me and of all her students. I get the feeling that she knew what was going on with them even before they did, or even before I did.
Yeah.
And she provided that support that we needed at the time. And she's one of the reasons why my high school experience was positive, and why all those like dark times never really evolved into something serious. And she's great, and up till this day, I'm so thankful for her. During Invisible Children, Marshall Bank, definitely. I love him, and people need to go listen to him and to his music and go follow him on social media. Like, they need to go to that. He's amazing, and he is someone that I think had many things against him. Mostly just like society, like people don't like loud people. People don't like people being true to themselves. And Marshall just like tore down every single wall in front of him. And became successful. And he's now like living his dream in Korea. I
was gonna say, you're gonna have to help me get him on the podcast. I'm so
proud of him, and I love him.
You're gonna have to help me get him on the podcast.
Yes, you should. You should.
He's big. He's big time now. I don't know if he'll. If I can get him on, he's pretty popular these days. So that's maybe one to shoot for the future.
He's always been. He's always been, but the world didn't know.
Yeah, exactly.
So
that's
to
such
me,
a
Marshall,
good way to put
it. He's so important to me in my life, and we still talk relatively often. I saw him a few years ago, and we chat every now and then. So,
and just
I love him to death.
Just so everybody listening, we're talking about Marshall Bing. He's it's K-pop, right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's
so he was my teammate here during Invisible Children. So we lived together in a van for 3 years, and he was my leader and my mentor, and I learned so much from him. But after that, he got, and I don't know how, that's something for him to tell, but he got on a reality show in South Korea, similar to like, I don't know, American Idol, X Factor kind of style. And that's where he just like, boom, like he's now doing great with K-pop music in South Korea. And I've seen him traveling around, like giving concerts, and he's amazing.
Yeah, so go check him out. Search Marshall Bing and give him a listen and hear some of his music and his stuff. And we'll work on getting him on the show one of these days. Fingers crossed.
I'll talk to him.
Perfect. You're my guy. We're kind of wrapping things up here. We're getting towards the end of the show. I've got 4 more questions. If you thought the other ones, in the first part of this were tough, then we got some four tough questions coming at you. You ready?
Ready.
All right. First one is, what would you say you're most proud of to date?
Okay, that's not as tough. That's easy.
I'll ease into it.
Yeah, I'm proud. I'm proud to be here. I'm proud to be living my dream. To some people, it might. Well, I don't know what other people might think, but it feels like to some people, life is just like an easy breeze, or that's the way it seems from the outside. And there's been so many hard times. I feel like in my life, there's been a lot of obstacles, and the fact that I can be here and talk to you the way I'm talking to you, and be okay with people listening to this story, and like that, I'm just so proud.
You should be. It's cool.
Thank you.
It's cool. And you as a human being, like, You have so much value and so much worth and so much to give the world. So thank you for sharing parts of your story and being open and vulnerable. It's huge. It's awesome.
Thank you.
What do you look forward to most in the future? Do you have any goals or ambitions?
Yes, I'm really, really excited. And this is mostly focused to work, but as I'm still fairly new to the UN system and to UNHCR, I'm just really, really excited about what may come, whatever that is. I've learned a lot this past year, and I really do wish I can grow with my colleagues and with my office and in the work that I do.
Cool.
I was just selected for a fellowship in innovation, so I'm really, really excited to see where that goes. Thank you. I'm still not sure what that's going to look like. But it's like a year-long process, and I'm just really, really excited to be a part of it.
That's cool.
And my master's, finally, I thank you. With the struggles that I had with education, and both financially and academically, the fact that I'm doing my master's right now while working is, to me, it's like a huge accomplishment, and I'm really excited to just keep learning. It's only been a semester, so it's still a long way to go, but I'm really, really excited about what's coming.
And what are you getting your master's in?
It's in refugee protection and forced migration studies.
Nice. Man, that's cool. That's a very specialized and fits perfectly into what you're doing now though with the UN. So that's great.
Love it, yeah.
Do you ever think about your legacy? When you look back on your life, what do you want your legacy to be?
That's a good question. I mean, not as often as I probably should think about it. In recent years, I have thought about it a lot more, and not through my own initiative. Something beautiful that has happened was that through my work, a lot of people approached me and other colleagues to thank me and thank us. And of course, that's not the reason I do it. But whenever I hear people tell me how an action I took, or how just a workshop or some guidance that I gave positively affected them. Yeah. It feels great, but it's also made me think about what I want to keep doing. And again, this is not humble from my part, but I'm very, very happy to say that if I were not here tomorrow, I can say that I have left a legacy, and I hope that I can keep expanding on that. But I do think I have already made a difference, and not a lot of people can say that. And those who can say it, I feel like don't say it. I've mentioned the word twice already. I feel like we live in a world where we value being humble a lot, and we confuse that with hiding how proud we are and hiding our accomplishments. And I think more people need to share what they're good at and what they love and what they can share and teach others. So again, I scream it to the world. I'm so happy that I have already made an impact, and people's lives have gotten better because of work I have done with other people. Of course, this is a team effort, but it's beautiful to be able to say that, and that's something I want to keep expanding on.
That's awesome. We're running short on time here, but I got one last question. Looking back, what advice would you tell little Hiram?
I would... Oh my God, I just keep pushing, and be more daring, and don't wait. I would say you're going to live a great life, but the sooner you start, the better.
Perfect. Well said. Thanks so much for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Shane.
This has been really fun. We've got about 40 seconds here. I'm going to close this out, and we'll go from there. But thank you so much. It means a lot for your vulnerability and your ability and willingness to share your story. So thank you.
Thank you, Shane. This was a great experience for me as well, so thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for listening. If you want to contribute and help share the story, we really appreciate that. Go on social media, share the podcast, share this podcast, and let us know what you think. We really appreciate you all out there. Thank you all so much. We love you. Peace.